Have you ever wondered if everything we've been taught about human civilization is completely wrong? What if I told you that ancient texts from thousands of years ago describe advanced beings from the stars who came to Earth, genetically modified primitive humans, and created the foundation of all human civilization? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most controversial and fascinating stories in ancient history, the complete story of the Anunnaki. Before we begin, I need you to understand something crucial. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about human origins. These aren't modern conspiracy theories or science fiction fantasies. These are stories carved in stone, written on clay tablets, and preserved in the oldest literature known to humanity. And the implications are absolutely mind-blowing. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and prepare to have your worldview completely shattered. Because by the end of this video, you'll never look at human history the same way again. Let's start with a question that haunts archaeologists and historians to this day. How did human civilization suddenly explode out of nowhere around 6,000 years ago? For millions of years, humans were hunter-gatherers, living in small tribes, using basic tools. Then suddenly, seemingly overnight in historical terms, we had massive cities, complex writing systems, advanced mathematics, sophisticated agriculture, and monumental architecture that we can barely replicate today. This is what scholars call the Neolithic Revolution. But here's the thing that keeps them awake at night. There's no gradual progression, no slow development over thousands of years. It's like someone flipped a switch and humans became exponentially more advanced practically overnight. Now, what if I told you that ancient Sumerian texts, some of the oldest written records on Earth, provide a very different explanation for this sudden leap? An explanation that involves visitors from another world. The word Anunnaki literally means those who came from heaven to earth in ancient Sumerian. But these weren't gods in the way we typically think of them. According to the translations of cuneiform tablets, particularly the work done by scholars studying Mesopotamian texts, the Anunnaki were described as physical beings with advanced technology who arrived on Earth with a very specific mission. Picture this scene from approximately 450,000 years ago, according to ancient accounts. A dying planet called Nibiru faces an atmospheric crisis. The planet's atmosphere is deteriorating, and their scientists determine that dispersing gold particles in their atmosphere could create a protective shield. But there's a problem. They've exhausted their gold supplies. Enter the Anunnaki's solution, Earth. Our planet is rich in gold, and more importantly, it's relatively close to their homeworld during certain orbital periods. So they mount what essentially amounts to the most ambitious mining operation in galactic history. The leader of this expedition, according to Sumerian texts, was a being named Anu, the ruler of their home planet. But the actual hands-on leadership fell to his sons, Enlil and Enki. And this is where the story gets incredibly complex and frankly a bit dramatic, because these two brothers had very different philosophies about how to handle the Earth mission, and their conflict would shape the entire future of humanity. Enlil was the military commander type, focused on the mission, maintaining order and getting the job done efficiently. Enki, on the other hand, was the scientist and engineer, curious about Earth's life forms, innovative in his approaches, more sympathetic to the primitive humans they encountered. Now here's where it gets really interesting. According to these ancient accounts, the Anunnaki initially did all the mining themselves. They established bases, set up mining operations, and began extracting gold from various locations around the Earth. Some researchers point to ancient mining sites in Africa that show evidence of sophisticated extraction techniques dating back hundreds of thousands of years as potential evidence of these operations. But there was a problem. Mining is hard work, even with advanced technology. The Anunnaki workers, called the Igigi, eventually grew tired of the constant labor. According to the texts, they essentially went on strike, demanding better conditions and relief from the backbreaking work. This created a crisis for the mission leadership. They needed the gold, but they were facing a worker rebellion. That's when Enki proposed a solution that would change everything, create a workforce, but not just any workforce. Enki suggested taking the primitive hominids that already existed on Earth and genetically modifying them to create a species capable of understanding understanding instructions, using tools effectively, and performing the mining work that the Anunnaki needed done. Think about what this means. According to these ancient accounts, humans weren't the product of pure evolution or divine creation in the traditional sense. We were the result of advanced genetic engineering, a hybrid species created by combining Anunnaki DNA with that of early hominids. The Sumerian texts describe this process in surprisingly specific detail. They talk about creating humans in a laboratory setting, using genetic material from both species, and even mention multiple attempts before achieving success. The first humans were reportedly created unable to reproduce, serving purely as workers. Later modifications gave humans the ability to procreate. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds like science fiction, but consider this. Ancient Sumerian texts describe concepts that humans supposedly shouldn't have understood for thousands more years. They talk about the solar system with remarkable accuracy, describe genetic manipulation techniques, and detail technological processes that mirror modern understanding in uncanny ways. But the story doesn't end with the creation of human workers. According to these accounts, the relationship between the Anunnaki and humans became incredibly complex. Some Anunnaki, particularly those allied with Enki, began to care about their human creations. They taught humans various skills: agriculture, mathematics, writing, medicine, and astronomy. This is where we start to see potential explanations for those sudden leaps in human civilization. What if the rapid development of Sumerian culture, with its advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering, wasn't the result of human innovation alone? What if it was direct knowledge transfer from an advanced species? Meanwhile, Enlil reportedly became increasingly concerned about human development. According to the texts, he worried that humans were becoming too numerous, too intelligent, and potentially too powerful. The famous flood story, found not just in the Bible but in cultures around the world, takes on a very different meaning in this context. In Sumerian accounts, the flood wasn't divine punishment for human sin. It was Enlil's solution to what he saw as the human problem. The texts describe him learning of an impending natural disaster, a massive flood caused by climatic changes, and deciding not to warn humanity, essentially using the disaster to reduce human population. But here's the twist that makes this story even more compelling. Enki, who had grown attached to his human creations, couldn't stand by and watch them all perish. According to the accounts, he secretly warned a human named Utnapishtim, later known in various cultures as Noah, instructing him to build a vessel and save not just his family, but representatives of Earth's animal species. This internal conflict between the Anunnaki leaders, Enlil wanting to control or reduce human population, and Enki wanting to preserve and advance humanity, supposedly continued for thousands of years and explains many of the catastrophes and advances described in ancient texts. But perhaps the most intriguing part of the Anunnaki story is what happened next. According to various ancient sources, the Anunnaki didn't just disappear. They gradually withdrew from direct human contact, but continued to influence human development through selected intermediaries. This is where the concept of kingship allegedly originated. Ancient Sumerian texts describe kingship as being lowered from heaven, with the first kings being chosen and instructed by the Anunnaki themselves. These human rulers supposedly maintained direct contact with their Anunnaki patrons, receiving guidance on everything from city planning to legal codes. Consider the implications. What if the remarkable similarities between ancient legal codes, architectural techniques, and astronomical knowledge across supposedly isolated ancient civilizations weren't coincidental? What if they all stemmed from the same source, knowledge passed down from the Anunnaki through their chosen human representatives? The story gets even more complex when we examine the various names and roles attributed to different Anunnaki beings. Enlil became associated with storms and authority. Enki, also called Ea, was linked with wisdom, water, and craftsmanship. Inanna, an Anunnaki female, was connected with love, beauty, and warfare. These beings were later adopted into the pantheons of various cultures under different names, but their core characteristics remained remarkably consistent. Now, here's where we need to address the elephant in the room. Is any of this actually true? The honest answer is that we don't know for certain. What we do know is that these stories exist in some of humanity's oldest written records. We know that they describe technological and scientific concepts that ancient peoples supposedly shouldn't have understood, and we know that they offer explanations for historical mysteries that mainstream archaeology still struggles to answer. Critics rightfully point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The genetic engineering described in these texts, while detailed, was written down thousands of years after the alleged events. The astronomical knowledge, while impressive, could potentially be explained through careful observation over long periods. The sudden advancement of civilization, while remarkable, might have natural explanations we simply haven't discovered yet. But supporters of the Anunnaki theory point to compelling evidence that's harder to dismiss. Ancient art depicting figures in what appear to be spacesuits or breathing apparatus. Megalithic structures built with precision that challenges modern engineering capabilities. Genetic anomalies in human DNA that suggest possible manipulation. And most intriguingly, the consistent presence of similar stories across cultures that had no known contact with each other. The more you dig into this topic, the more questions arise. Why do ancient cultures around the world have such similar flood stories? Why do they all describe beings from the sky who taught humans essential skills? Why do we find advanced mathematical and astronomical knowledge embedded in structures that are thousands of years old? And here's perhaps the most unsettling question of all. If the Anunnaki story is true, where are they now? According to various interpretations of ancient texts, the Anunnaki didn't leave permanently. Some accounts suggest they continue to monitor human development from a distance. Others propose that they integrated so thoroughly with human society that their descendants walk among us today. Some researchers point to the concept of the Anunnaki's planet, Nibiru, as having an extremely long orbital period around our sun. If this is true, it would mean the Anunnaki can only easily travel between worlds during specific windows when the planets are in relative proximity. This could explain both their arrival in ancient times and their apparent absence in more recent history. But what about the genetic legacy? If humans were indeed created through genetic manipulation involving Anunnaki DNA, what does that mean for us today? Some theorists suggest that certain human bloodlines carry more Anunnaki genetic material than others, potentially explaining differences in capabilities, longevity, or even psychic abilities reported throughout history. This leads us to one of the most controversial aspects of Anunnaki theory, the suggestion that certain elite families or groups maintain knowledge of this heritage and use it to maintain power and influence in modern society. While this ventures into conspiracy territory, it's worth noting that many ancient cultures did maintain beliefs about divine bloodlines and special genetic inheritances. The implications extend beyond just human origins. If the Anunnaki story is accurate, it means we're not alone in the universe, and we never have been. It suggests that our development as a species has been guided, at least partially, by outside intervention, and it raises profound questions about our future relationship with our creators. Consider the technological parallels between ancient descriptions and modern capabilities. The Anunnaki were described as having flying vehicles, advanced communication systems, genetic manipulation technology, and the ability to travel between worlds. We're now developing all of these capabilities ourselves. Could this be coincidence, or are we following a predetermined path laid out by our genetic programmers? Some researchers suggest that the rapid acceleration of human technology in the last century isn't just natural progress, but represents us reaching a level of development that approaches Anunnaki capabilities. They theorize that certain technological breakthroughs might actually be the result of rediscovering ancient knowledge rather than creating entirely new innovations. The story of the Anunnaki also offers a different perspective on human nature itself. Instead of being inherently flawed, beings struggling with original sin, or purely evolved creatures competing for survival, we might be a hybrid species carrying the genetic legacy of two very different types of beings, the earthly and the celestial. This could explain the remarkable contradictions in human behavior, our capacity for both incredible compassion and devastating cruelty, our ability to create beautiful art and devastating weapons, our drive to explore and discover, combined with our tendency to destroy and pollute. If we carry genetic material from both primitive Earth creatures and advanced spacefaring beings, these contradictions begin to make sense. But perhaps the most important question isn't whether the Anunnaki story is literally true, but what it tells us about ourselves and our potential. Whether these accounts represent historical fact, metaphorical truth, or ancient science fiction, they consistently point toward humanity having capabilities far beyond what we typically imagine. The ancient texts describe humans as having been created with tremendous potential, intelligence, creativity, spiritual awareness, and the ability to grow beyond even their creators' expectations. This perspective suggests that our current limitations might be self-imposed rather than inherent. If there's truth to the Anunnaki narrative, it also means that our relationship with our origins is far from over. Ancient prophecies from various cultures speak of a return, a time when the sky gods will come back to Earth. Some interpret current phenomena like increased UFO sightings and global upheaval as signs that this return is approaching. Rapid technological advancement, whether you believe in the literal truth of the Anunnaki story or view it as powerful mythology, it serves as a mirror reflecting our deepest questions about identity, purpose, and potential. It challenges us to think bigger about what we might be capable of, both as individuals and as a species. The ancient Sumerians who first recorded these stories lived in a time of incredible innovation and cultural development. They created the first known writing system, established the first cities, developed complex mathematics, and laid the foundation for much of what we call civilization. Perhaps their greatest creation, though, was this story that continues to challenge and inspire us thousands of years later. As we stand on the brink of becoming a spacefaring species ourselves, developing genetic engineering capabilities, and possibly making contact with other intelligent life, the Anunnaki story feels more relevant than ever. We might be approaching the point where we could do for another species what the Anunnaki allegedly did for us. The complete story of the Anunnaki isn't just about ancient aliens or genetic manipulation. It's about the eternal human quest to understand our origins, our purpose, and our destiny. It's about the possibility that we're far more than we imagine ourselves to be, and that our greatest adventures might still lie ahead. So the next time you look up at the stars, remember that according to one of humanity's oldest stories, that's where we came from. And perhaps, if we can live up to our potential, it's where we're destined to return.